In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the fuel pump assembly on this Ram 2500 with a 6.4 liter gas engine. We will be dropping the fuel tank for this, so let's get started. Before we start this job, we need to relieve fuel pressure from the system. The easiest way to do that is to open up the engine compartment fuse box by pressing on these two tabs and lifting the cap up. Looking at it carefully, you can see all of the fuses that are labeled here, as well as the relays. Looking at the rightmost row, you'll see fuel pump motor right here. F70 is the fuse number, and that's the one we're after, because if we pull this, there will be no more fuel pump. And just looking at the overall schematic of the fuses and relays, F70 is right here in the top right area. And looking top down from the top of the fuse box, it's this green 30 amp fuse right here. It's easy to take this fuse out with some needle nose pliers. Just be very gentle. Of course, you don't want to break it. Very gently grab it, wiggle it, and pull it right out. I'm going to sit it right here. That way I don't lose it. Now let's go inside the truck, crank the engine over, and that's going to release the rest of the fuel pressure that's left in the system. The fuel pump isn't running, but the injectors will open up. So, of course, that's just going to naturally release the fuel pressure. The engine might start, but if it does, it'll stumble really quickly and die out, or it just might not start at all. All right, that's exactly what we were looking for. Fuel pressure has been released. Now underneath the truck at the fuel tank, I'm doing this on a lift, so I'm going to add a support. If you're doing this on the ground, of course you still want to add a support, but it's probably going to look a little bit different. This is a transmission jack with a fuel tank adapter on it. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on the tank. This is a plastic tank, and even if it wasn't, you're not going to want to crush it or lift up the truck with it. You just want to support it. So this is touching, just a little bit extra pressure, so that as I undo the straps, the tank doesn't just drop down. Of course, we have lines and electrical connectors connected here, as well as the filler neck, which we will have to disconnect once this drops down a little bit. So let's unbolt the straps first. Looking from the other side of the fuel tank, you can see both fuel tank straps. Let's remove them one at a time. You'll need a 16mm socket with a long extension so you can reach it. Let's remove the other strap. Let's pull the straps off. To do that, just slide it down off the stud. Push it up on the frame side and twist it. That's going to unhook it from its bracket. There we go. Set that aside. Of course, if it's in poor condition, you're going to want to replace these. Lower the tank very little, just enough to make a little bit more space up top to work with. All right. With a 7mm socket or a flathead screwdriver, loosen up the clamp holding the filler neck onto the fuel tank. That should be plenty. Just have to break this free. I'm using a pry bar to try to push the hose off. All right, here you can see the connectors for the fuel pump. So let's lower the tank a little bit more. We got a main electrical connector and a few lines to disconnect. I'm going to spray all of these down with some rust penetrant. There's a lot of sand and debris here. I want to give them the best chance they have at coming undone. Some rust penetrant won't hurt anything, and it will definitely help. I'm going to start with the main electrical connector. There's a lock on it. I'm going to pull the lock back. A lot of times these are stuck. There we go. Okay. Press on that white tab, disconnect it. This hose right here, we're going to have to pull on the red tab and pry it up. That's going to unlock it. And with that unlocked, we should be able to press underneath right here. There's a tab that is a little bit hidden, but pressing that will actually unlock the connector or the line. There we go. This is going to be the main fuel line, so be careful of any fuel spraying out. There we go. All right, so the screwdriver right in this slot right here, prying out, is what finally unlocked this clip. And like I said, this was the main fuel line, so fuel did spill. Let's undo this blue clip right here. And same way as the previous one is, I'm gonna pull it up, set it down, and on the bottom there's gonna be a tab to press. All right, last connector right here. This clip actually pulls out this way. There's no lock on it. I'm gonna set a pocket screwdriver through the clip right as I unlock it, so it can stay unlocked at least on one end. That'll allow me to work on the other end. All right. Oh. Yeah, that also happens sometimes. These break. I have a trick for resecuring these in case they break. I'll show you that later. So now this can be pulled off. Okay, now slowly drop the tank. Make sure nothing is getting caught. Now with the tank on the ground, unfortunately I can't use a brass punch. Usually I would use a brass punch so it doesn't make sparks and go on the edge, but this is a round, flat edge and there's nothing to grab onto. So I'm going to carefully use this pry bar, stick it in these openings, turn the ring counterclockwise to unlock the fuel pump. I also want to mention that I soaked it in rust penetrant. That's the liquid that you see here. And of course, before that, I blew off all the debris. Don't use a vacuum to do this because there are fuel fumes in the air. Use compressed air and blow it all off. Oh, it's working. It's working. It's going to pop out any second now. All right, I'm gonna blow this off one more time so that any debris that is sitting up here from tapping in, vibrating it loose, doesn't go inside the fuel tank. Remove the ring. Looks like our fuel pump is cracked in a bunch of different spots. Take the pump out. Try to drain this as much as possible before you take it out so that you don't make a mess and spill fuel on the floor. And as you pull it out, pay attention to the float. Make sure that that doesn't get caught. And there it is. Remove the old O-ring. And we're gonna clean up this surface here as well. Use a rag and wipe it. Make sure that the surface will seal up when the new O-ring and the new pump go on. Take the new O-ring, lay it down in its groove. It might not stay because it's molded to the bag that it came in. On the new fuel pump, the arm is going to be tied with a rubber band. We're going to have to remove this, of course. And the way you install this is the end of it goes right up in this slot and snaps into position. We go. Make sure it's locked in, otherwise it's going to fall off inside the fuel tank. And make sure that it actually pivots smoothly, which it does. Of course, we're going to remove this baggie. This is just here for protection during shipping. So untie the little wire tie. Gently pull this off, and this is now ready to install. And speaking of installing, slide it down into the fuel tank, level first so that it doesn't get damaged, and then the fuel pump assembly itself. Put it down all the way, and remember that the main fuel line and the connector were facing straight ahead as I'm looking at it here. This large tab at the back was on the back side. Now I know the old one was broken, so I can't really reference that. Make sure the O-ring is still seated as you press this down, and that just dropped into position. This is gonna line it up perfectly on the back, so you don't need to worry about it being a little bit off. Take the ring and drop it down. The ring is not directional, so it doesn't matter how you line it up. and I did put a little bit of anti-seize on the areas where the tabs are supposed to lock in, not only so it can help it lock in a little bit, but also so that it doesn't get stuck in the future as bad as it just did. Okay, there we go. All right, so now let's tap it the other way and lock it in. Oh, that just locked in. Let's raise up the fuel tank, get it back in position. As you do this, you want to make sure it doesn't pinch anything like the lines or any electrical connectors that are up there or other wires. And before I bring it all the way up, let's plug everything in. Doesn't matter what you start with, plug in everything that you disconnected. Make sure everything is going to click and lock in. This connector is proving very difficult to lock, and the lock actually might be completely stuck, so before I break anything, I'm just going to leave it like this. It did click in, so it is latched in. It's just that I can't lock the latch. So as you can see, it's not coming out if I pull on it. I'm going to leave it like that. Let's lock in these two, and then I'll show you how to relock this one after the latch broke. This one here was the blue locking tab. Just slide it over, make sure this is pressed all the way in, and there we go. You shouldn't be able to pull that off. And this one was the red one. Just slide it over and press it down. All right, there we go, that clicked. This does not slide off, so that's perfect. As for this one, I'm actually going to use a wire tie. And what I will do is get one that is the proper thickness. You don't want a very thin one. You want it about as wide as this whole connector, and I'm just going to loop it around. When I tighten it up, it's actually going to make it so that the connector or the line can't slide out, because it's going right through where the clip used to be going, just like this, and then loop it back. I know this one's extremely long. We'll have to trim it, of course. You don't have to tighten it down a lot, just get it close. And now, as you can see, that's locked in. You can cut off the excess if you want, or you could just leave it. And that is now locked. And the next time this needs to be removed, all you have to do is just cut the wire tie. Now raise the tank up a little bit. That way we can get that filler neck connected. Ooh, look at that. I got it on. I had to reach the other way around through the wheel well and got it slid on there. All right, clamp is back on. This is gonna be the hard part because you have to hold it so you can tighten it, but it's hard to reach. Make sure it stays centered between the end of the fitting and the end of the hose. Once you get it snugged up, you should be able to let go of it, and it'll stay on there where you put it. And when you tighten this, you don't need to go until it stops spinning. That's actually going to strip out the clamp, then you'll have to replace it. So just snug it up until it starts squishing the hose. I'm holding the ratchet by the head almost, so I really am not putting much pressure on it. Right there, I can feel that it got snug, so I'm going to leave it at that. That's plenty tight. Finish raising up the fuel tank. Make sure it's seated in position. Let's put the straps back on, hook them on to the frame side, and then we'll have to slide them over the studs on the other side. Put the strap over, try to start it onto the stud. Perfect. And do the same in the rear. Snug them up. Torque these mounting nuts to 45 foot-pounds. All right, that's the rear. 45 foot-pounds on this one as well. All right, those are both tight. Now you can remove the support you had on the fuel tank. Now let's reinstall our fuse. Make sure you put it back in the correct slot. In order to correctly prime the fuel system, what you want to do is take your key, stick it in the ignition, turn it to the on position. You're going to hear that fuel pump cycle. That's priming the system. Shut it off, turn it back on. And one more time. I like to do this 3 times. And now, try to start it. It might stumble a little bit, or it might even completely shut off after a couple seconds. That means there's air in the fuel system, so cycle it again, and then try to start it again if that's the case for you. Perfect. Looks like everything works. I'm gonna let it idle for a little bit, make sure everything's good. Of course, you wanna check for leaks everywhere. Other than that, job is done.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.